So, I know what you're thinking, which is probably that, Nate, you might already have enough fungi for your project. So why are you thinking of climbing a tree to grab this one? And the answer to that is because I'm really quite stupid, in a lot of regards. So I'm gonna clamber up this box elder maple that's probably about like 4 or 5 inches DBH. Maybe it'll support my weight, maybe it won't. But we're gonna try to get this fungus and let's get to the bottom of what's parasitizing the Acer negundo, shall we? So I actually managed to pull it off without knocking the tree over or falling into the ravine, which is quite a successful attempt in my personal opinion, given that I didn't get wet at all and I was doing all of this activity in my moccasins that I got for Christmas a couple years back. But so what we're working with is clearly some species of agaricoid mushroom, you know, a nice gilled fungus. So what it's probably going to come down to, I'm probably going to take a spore print. Probably going to use the larger one for the spore print, unfortunately. Probably going to use this little diminutive guy to represent the species. I think I can actually split this mushroom in half to get the gill attachment, and then I can use the halves of the cap to hopefully produce a spore print. And given those two pieces of information, hopefully I'll be able to key out what exactly this fungus is. As you can see, it's kind of large. Like, this knife is probably like 4 inches long. And so this mushroom's, you know, it's quite sizable, but it was growing on, and you know, this is the good thing about knowing your trees, is that you can tell what the fungi are associating with. So like when you're fungal hunting, it does definitely help to know your trees. But this guy was growing on Acer negundo, growing right out of an alive Acer negundo. So if I had to guess the ecology here, I would say it's either parasitic or saprotrophic. But yeah, so let's get into preparing a spore print and splitting this guy to see what the gill attachment looks like. So as you can see here, we've got all the necessary implements for a good spore print. We've got a cup to cover up the cap with to keep the humidity high. We've got the mushroom. We've got the surface that we're actually going to be using for a spore print, a nice folded up sheet of aluminum foil. And of course, my handy dandy sampling knife. So let's get into business, shall we? And start figuring out what the hell this mushroom exactly is. So an important thing to note when you're actually sampling fungi is how the tissue bruises. You know, because in a lot of species, the tissue will bruise various colors. Like, I've seen mushrooms that'll bruise blue. I've seen mushrooms that'll bruise brown. This guy, the tissue isn't appearing to do any sort of discoloration upon injury. So that's not going to be a diagnostic factor we can use, unfortunately. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to split this cut cap right here in half to try to figure out what the gill arrangement is in this mushroom. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to put the cut halves on the sheet of tin foil, and then I'm going to cover it up with the cup. And then in 24 hours, hopefully, it'll deposit some spores. Not 100% sure whether or not it'll actually deposit spores once I cut it or not. Once I cut it in half, that is. But we're going to see if we can get to the bottom of this guy's identity, because it's a cool mushroom, you know? I like the way this guy looks. I like the way that it's... I don't like the way that it's parasitizing my Acer negundos, but... you know, it's a cool mushroom, and it's just playing its part in the ecosystem. So let's split it in half and see what the gill attachment is. So I've just split this guy in half, and as we can see, the gill surface definitely runs up against the stem here. But I would hesitate to call it decurrent because they don't really run down the stipe very far. I feel like, and I'm mostly shooting from the hip here, so if I'm wrong, go ahead and forgive me, but I would call this either like an adnate or an adnext, I think. I don't know, I'm going to take some pictures of the gill attachment and compare it to my reference photos to make sure that I get the right vocabulary on that. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to set the cap halves down on our nice piece of tin foil there. Move the plate out of the way. And then we are going to cover it up with a nice cup to keep that humidity nice and high. And hopefully this guy will deposit some spores for me, and then I'll have the spore print figured out, and then we might be able to figure out what this fungus is. So stay tuned for that, folks. So enough time has passed, and it looks like we've actually got a spore print. As you can see here, it's kind of difficult to see, but the spore print is looking like it's a wonderful white color, you know? It's almost impossible to see when I hold it out in the normal light. But that's what we've got the grow lights for, to reveal what we can't see so easily. So I'm going to try and key this puppy out and see if we can finally get an identification on our the wonderful mystery fungus that was parasitizing the Acer negundo. I've got a tentative identification on this species, but we're going to have to key it out to see if that's actually borne out. So I'm going to do that real quick and then get back to you guys. So folks, I keyed it out, and it's looking like our result is the exact same as what my tentative identification was, and that will place this mushroom as the species Hypsizygus ulmarius. Okay, so we're going to talk about that real quick. Absolutely. So there we have it, folks. Hypsizygus ulmarius. And, you know, I was able to tentatively identify this mushroom as that species because I just basically looked up, I just did a brief Google search on mushrooms that parasitize Acer negundo, and Hypsizygus ulmarius was actually one of the first species to come up. So, you know, it's borne out by the key. So our mystery mushroom today, folks, is Hypsizygus ulmarius. It's some sort of the common name here is some sort of, I don't know, something about oyster mushrooms, which is kind of silly because in my personal opinion this doesn't look a damn thing like members of the genus Pleurotus, the true oyster mushrooms. But there we have it, folks. Hypsizygus ulmarius. Have a good one.